The doorbell rang at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. 3 sharp, impatient rings that cut through the silence of my house like a knife. I already knew who it was before I even reached the door. My son Daniel never showed up unannounced unless he needed something. I left my half-finished cup of tea on the counter and walked slowly down the hallway. Through the front windows, I could see his car, a shiny black SUV, parked crookedly in the driveway. Typical Daniel, always in a hurry, always careless with everything including people. When I opened the door, he was already on his phone, thumb flying across the screen. In his other hand, a brown envelope. He gave me a quick air kiss, not even touching my cheek, and brushed past me into the kitchen like he still lived here. "Morning, Mom. We need to talk," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down my chair, the one by the window where I usually read the paper. "Coffee would be great," he added without looking up. I made it automatically. 10 years a widow and I still served the men in my life as if it were my duty. When I placed the mug in front of him, I couldn't help noticing how tense his hands looked, how white his knuckles were as he scrolled. "Is Sophie okay and the kids?" I asked gently. I hadn't seen my grandchildren in months. "They're fine," Daniel muttered, finally putting his phone away. He took a sip of coffee and sighed. "I'll get right to the point, Mom. Sophie got herself into a bit of a situation." A familiar chill ran down my spine. "What kind of situation?" He pushed the envelope toward me. "She made some investments. They didn't pan out." I opened it carefully. Inside were pages of bank statements, loan notices, and a contract with a number circled in red. 300,000. My breath caught. "Daniel," I whispered, "that's almost everything I have." He leaned back in his chair, completely calm. "Mom, you live alone. The house is paid off. You've got your pension, your savings. You're 68. What are you saving for?" His tone was light, almost reasonable, but the words cut deep. "This house is my security," I said softly. "And I still have medical bills," he interrupted, tapping the table. "Mom, please. Sophie just trusted the wrong person. If we don't pay this off today, things could get ugly." I frowned. "Ugly how?" "They're not bankers, Mom," he said flatly. "They're dangerous people." A tremor of fear went through me. "What have you gotten involved in, Daniel?" "You don't need to know," he snapped. "Just trust me. I'll pay you back once the business stabilizes. I just need you to transfer the money now before it's too late." He sounded so much like his father in that moment. Edward, my late husband. Smooth, commanding, leaving no room for my opinion. I stared at the envelope, then at my son's face, the boy who once brought me wild flowers and called me his hero. Now he was a stranger in my kitchen demanding my life savings. "You've borrowed money from me before," I said quietly. I never saw any of it again. His face hardened. "This is different. This is life or death, Mom. I'm your only son, your family. You always said you'd do anything for me. That line, "you'd do anything for me." It used to be my weakness. The same one Edward used to keep me small and obedient for 30 years. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling slightly. "I need to think about it," I whispered. "There's no time to think." Daniel's voice rose. "I need that money in my account before the end of the day. Tomorrow will be too late." And he stood up, pacing like a trapped animal. Then he stopped behind my chair, placing his hands on my shoulders. His grip was firm, heavy, almost possessive. "Mom," he said softer now, "you know I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious. It's for Sophie's safety, for the family." Family. That word again. The word that always chained me. I closed my eyes and nodded weakly. "Okay," I said at last. "I'll transfer it." Relief washed over his face. For the first time that morning, he smiled that same charming smile that used to melt my heart when he was a boy. "Thanks, Mom. I knew I could count on you." He kissed my forehead, grabbed his phone, and headed toward the door. "I've got a meeting, but I'll be back for dinner." "Okay, we'll sort everything out then." He paused at the door and looked back. "Don't disappoint me, Mom." And then he was gone. The house fell silent except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. His half-empty cup of coffee sat in front of me, a dark, bitter reminder of what had just happened. I stared at it for a long time. Then something in me began to shift slowly but unmistakably. A voice inside me whispered words I had never dared to think before. Enough. Through the window, I watched Daniel's car speed down the road, throwing gravel behind it. That's when the idea first formed in my mind. An idea the old Margaret would never have considered. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Marissa," I said when she answered. "It's Margaret. I need your help." Marissa arrived half an hour later. We'd been friends since college before I dropped out to marry Edward. She'd always been the strong one, the practical one. A lawyer independent, everything I wasn't. When I told her what Daniel had done, she nearly dropped her tea. $300,000 or Margaret, that's insane. It's not the first time I admitted my voice breaking. Last year it was $100,000. Before that, $50,000. He always promises to repay me, but he never does. Marissa slammed her cup down. And why do you keep giving in? You're one of the smartest women I know. How can you not see what he's doing? I didn't have an answer, just a whisper. He's my son. And you're his mother, not his bank, she snapped. Edward manipulated you for decades, and now Daniel is doing the same thing. When does it stop, Margaret? I looked out the window at my garden. The roses were blooming again after years of failing in bad soil. They had survived neglect storms and cold. Just like me. Today, I said suddenly, it stops today. Marissa stared at me, then smiled. Finally, we spent the next hour planning quietly. She would help me open a new account one Daniel didn't know existed and transfer my funds there. Then I would pack my bags and leave before he came back for dinner. It sounded outrageous, impossible. But as I listened to my own voice explaining the plan, I realized how calm I felt. Fearful, yes, but also free. When I opened my closet later that afternoon, I stared at my clothes, my memories, my life neatly folded on those shelves. I couldn't remember the last time I'd bought something for myself without thinking about what Edward or Daniel would think. I'd never chosen a color, a style, anything simply because I liked it. I packed methodically, taking only what I needed. A few photographs, including one of Daniel as a child holding a bunch of wildflowers. My mother's recipe book. The scarf Edward had given me during one of those rare moments when he'd shown real affection. Each item felt heavier than its physical weight, laden with memories both sweet and painful. There was a moment when I nearly gave up. Standing with my hand on my closed suitcase, I imagined Daniel returning to find me gone. Fear rose within me. But then I saw the voided check from the last time he had borrowed money, and I remembered that fear is not love. Fear is a prison I had built for myself. I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. My hands were steady now, as the words flowed truths I had never spoken, feelings I had buried for decades. Daniel, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. The money you asked for is no longer available to you. I've moved it somewhere safe, somewhere you can't access it. For 30 years, your father controlled every aspect of my life. He made me believe my purpose was to serve him, to bend to his will without question. When he died, I thought I was finally free. But I wasn't. I just exchanged one controller for another. I have watched you become him, Daniel. The same manipulation, the same entitlement, the same disregard for anyone but yourself. And I have enabled it time and again because I thought that's what love meant, giving everything even when it hurts. Even when it's wrong. Today, I choose myself. Today, I say enough. I'm not angry with you. I'm sad for both of us. Sad that I never taught you what healthy love looks like. Sad that I allowed you to believe that people, especially women, especially mothers, exist to solve your problems and fund your mistakes. I will always love the boy who brought me wildflowers and called me his hero. But I cannot allow the man you've become to harm me anymore. I've contacted Detective James Sullivan at the Financial Crimes Unit about these dangerous people you're involved with. If you're truly in danger, he can help. If you're lying, which I suspect, then perhaps facing consequences will finally teach you what I failed to. Take care of your children, Daniel. Teach them better than I taught you. With love and regret, Mom. I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I added the old photograph of Daniel with the wildflowers and a small note. I still love this boy, but I cannot let the man he's become continue to hurt me. Marissa helped me carry my suitcase to her car. I didn't look back as we drove away, not at the house where I'd lived for 40 years, not at the garden I'd tended, not at the life I was leaving behind. I felt a strange lightness, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying for decades. At the bank, I transferred nearly all my savings, $297,000, to the new account Marissa had helped me set up. I kept only enough in my old account to avoid suspicion for a few more hours. The teller smiled at me, not knowing she was witnessing an act of rebellion, a declaration of independence from a woman who had spent her entire life being compliant. The airport was crowded. Families returning from vacations, business people hurrying to meetings, lovers reuniting. Among them, An older woman with a single suitcase traveling alone for the first time in her life. Me, Margaret Williams, not Edward's widow, not Daniel's mother, just Margaret. On the plane, I watched the ground fall away beneath me, my old life disappearing under clouds. I had never flown without Edward or Daniel arranging everything, making all the decisions, handling all the details. Now I was choosing my own destination. California. Sunshine. The ocean. A new beginning at 68. I rented a small apartment in Santa Barbara with a balcony overlooking the beach. It was more than I would have allowed myself in my old life. I would have saved the money, been practical, denied myself this small luxury. But this was my new life. A life where I could choose beauty and joy without justification. I cut my hair short the next day. The stylist seemed surprised when I asked her to take off the long gray waves I'd worn for decades. Edward had always insisted I keep my hair long. Even after his death, I'd maintained it out of habit, out of the lingering fear of disapproval. But as I watched the silver strands fall to the floor, I felt another piece of my old self dropping away. That's when I bought my first bright-colored clothes, a turquoise blouse, red sandals, a yellow sundress, colors Edward would have called attention-seeking and inappropriate for a woman my age, colors Daniel would have rolled his eyes at, colors that made me feel alive. I spent my first week walking along the beach, watching the waves, breathing in the salt air. I took a photography class at the local community center, something I'd always wanted to try but had never been practical. I bought a simple digital camera and discovered the joy of capturing moments: a seagull in flight, the sunset over the ocean, an elderly couple holding hands on the boardwalk. The first time I uploaded my photos to my new laptop, I cried. Not out of sadness, but wonder. All these years I'd been looking at the world through someone else's lens. Now I was seeing it through my own eyes, capturing what moved me, what I found beautiful without seeking anyone's approval. I began to meet people. The barista at the coffee shop who called me by name after just 2 visits. The retired teacher who ran the photography class and praised my natural eye. The group of women who walked along the beach every morning, the Sea Sisters they called themselves, who invited me to join them. Small connections, but they were mine. Chosen by me, not arranged by the men in my life. 2 months passed in this quiet, gentle rhythm of discovery. Then Marissa called. "Margaret, are you sitting down? Daniel's been looking for you. He hired a private investigator." My heart raced. Had I been found? Was I in danger? I hadn't told anyone where I'd gone. Not even Marissa. "Don't worry," she assured me. "He has no idea where you are. But there's more. Daniel and Sophie are in serious financial trouble. It wasn't just your money they were after. They've been running some kind of investment scam targeting other older people. The FBI is investigating them." I sat down heavily on my balcony chair, watching the waves roll in. My son, a criminal. It shouldn't have surprised me, the entitlement, the manipulation, the ease with which he lied, but it did. Somewhere inside me, I'd still held on to the image of that little boy with the wildflowers. "What will happen to them?" I asked. "They'll likely face charges." Marissa's voice was gentle but firm. "They've hurt a lot of people, Margaret. Not just you." After we hung up, I stood at the railing of my balcony for a long time. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought about Daniel's children, my grandchildren, who I hadn't seen in months. Would they understand why their grandmother had disappeared? Would they hate me for what was happening to their parents? I cried that night for everything that had been lost, for everything that could have been. But in the morning, I got up, made my coffee, and walked to the beach with my camera. Life continued. My life. For the first time, truly mine. I started taking an embroidery class next. Another thing Edward had discouraged, useless women's work, he'd called it. I discovered I had a talent for it, for creating delicate patterns with thread and needle. There was something soothing about the rhythm of it, the focus it required, the way something beautiful emerged from simple materials. My teacher Olivia was a domestic violence survivor who'd turned her hobby into therapy, then into a business. We became friends, sharing stories over coffee after class. When I finally told her mine about Edward, about Daniel, about my escape, she didn't seem shocked. "You'd be surprised how many women have similar stories," she said. Different details, same pattern. Control disguised as care. Abuse disguised as love. She invited me to join a support group for financial abuse survivors. Most of the women were like me, older, often widowed, manipulated by children or other relatives. Hearing their stories, I realized how common my experience was. How invisibility made us targets. How our generation had been taught that self-sacrifice was the highest virtue a woman could aspire to. In that group, I found my voice. At first, just a whisper sharing small pieces of my story, then stronger offering insights, even advice to newer members. The counselor who ran the group told me I had a gift for empathy, for making others feel heard and understood. Me, Margaret Williams, who had spent decades being silenced. When Olivia asked if I would help teach a beginner's embroidery class, I surprised myself by saying yes. I had never imagined standing in front of a room instructing others. But there I was, showing women how to create beauty one stitch at a time. My first student was a woman named Claire, recently divorced after 40 years of marriage. Her hands shook as she tried to thread the needle. "I won't be any good at this," she said, close to tears. My husband always told me I was all thumbs. I gently took the needle and thread from her. My husband used to say the same thing. That's why I never tried until after he was gone. "Let me show you a trick." By the end of the class, she had completed her first simple pattern, a small rose. It wasn't perfect. The stitches were uneven, the proportions slightly off. But when she looked at it, she smiled with such pride that I felt something warm bloom in my chest. I had helped her create something. I had made a difference, however small. We began donating our embroidered blankets to local shelters and hospitals. Each one had a message stitched along the edge. "You are not alone." Simple words, but powerful. Words I wished someone had said to me during those dark years with Edward, during those painful interactions with Daniel. One evening, I received an email from Marissa. She had attached a news article. Local businessman and wife charged in elder fraud scheme. There was Daniel's photo next to Sophie's. They looked tired, stressed, nothing like the polished couple who had visited my home demanding money. The article detailed how they had scammed nearly a dozen elderly people, mostly widows like me, out of their savings. The dangerous people had been a fiction. The investment opportunity, non-existent. Just a scheme to fund their lavish lifestyle, to cover gambling debts, to buy things they couldn't afford. I read the article 3 times, searching for some sign of the boy I had raised. How had we ended up here? What had I missed? What could I have done differently? The questions circled in my mind like seagulls, loud and insistent. That night I dreamed of Daniel as a child, holding out a bunch of wildflowers, his smile wide and innocent. In the dream, I reached for the flowers, but as my fingers touched them, they crumbled to dust. I woke up with tears on my face. I told myself it was normal to grieve, even when you're the one who chose to walk away, even when you know it was the right decision, even when the alternative was destruction. The next morning, while walking on the beach with my camera, I saw a group of inmates in orange jumpsuits working on a dune restoration project. They were planting small trees along the eroded shoreline, supervised by guards. I stopped to watch, curious about this effort to repair what had been damaged, to strengthen what had been weakened. One of the inmates looked up, wiping sweat from his brow, and for a moment I thought of Daniel. Was he in a place like this now? Was he doing work that might in some small way make amends for the harm he had caused? I hoped so, not out of vengeance, but because I believed in redemption and the possibility of change, even after terrible mistakes. I continued taking photos of the ocean, the sky, the small moments of beauty I encountered. I joined a book club at the local library. I made friends with my neighbors, a retired couple who invited me to dinner once a week. I volunteered at a literacy program helping adults learn to read. I built a life piece by piece, choice by choice. 4 months after I left Denver, I received a letter forwarded by Marissa. The handwriting on the envelope was instantly familiar. Daniel. I sat with it for a long time before opening it, steeling myself for manipulation, for guilt, for demands. Instead, I found something unexpected. An apology. A real one without excuses or justifications. Daniel wrote about his arrest, his time in jail awaiting trial, the therapy he had been mandated to attend. He wrote about facing the people he had harmed, about the shame of seeing his crimes detailed in the local newspaper, about Sophie filing for divorce. He wrote about Edward, about growing up watching how he treated me, about unconsciously adopting those same behaviors. I never wanted to be like him, he wrote, but I didn't know how to be any other way. At the end of the letter, he didn't ask for forgiveness, for money, for anything. He simply wrote, "I don't expect you to respond. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you, what Dad did to you. I'm sorry, Mom, truly sorry. I folded the letter carefully and put it in the drawer of my bedside table. I didn't respond not then. I needed time to process to determine if his words were genuine or just another manipulation. But I kept the letter, read it again and again in the following weeks. And I allowed myself to hope cautiously that perhaps Daniel was finally facing the truth about himself, about his father, about our family's painful legacy. A second letter arrived a month later. This one described the plea deal Daniel had accepted, 5 years eligible for parole in 3. He would be transferred to a minimum security facility with a work program. He was scared, he admitted, but also relieved. There's a kind of freedom in facing consequences, he wrote. I never understood that before. Again, he asked for nothing. And again, I didn't respond. The third letter came with a photograph Daniel in his orange jumpsuit, standing with a group of other inmates beside a newly planted section of trees along a coastline. On the back, he had written part of a coastal restoration project. It's the first thing I've ever done that feels meaningful. This time I wrote back. A short note, not promising anything, not closing any doors. I'm glad you're finding meaning, I wrote. Every day is a chance to plant something new. 9 months after I left Denver, I received a call from Sophie. She was hesitant, apologetic. I'm so sorry, Margaret. I should have stopped him. I should have said something. She told me she had been cooperating with the prosecutors, that she would likely avoid jail time, but would have to pay significant restitution. She and the children had moved in with her parents. She was working as a receptionist at a doctor's office, her first job in 10 years. Daniel told me what you did, she said. How you left. How you stood up to him. I wish I'd had your courage. We talked about the children, how they were coping with their father's absence, their new circumstances. I told her I missed them. Would it be possible, I asked cautiously, to speak with them sometime, to explain in my own way why I had disappeared from their lives? Sophie arranged a video call the following weekend. Seeing their faces, Ethan, now 10, and Marianne, 7, made my heart ache with love and regret. They had grown so much in the months since I'd left. They were shy at first, uncertain. But when I showed them the ocean from my balcony, told them about the dolphins I sometimes saw, they began to open up. Ethan was taking swimming lessons. Marianne had lost 2 teeth. Small details of their lives that I had been missing. Grandma, why did you move away? Ethan finally asked, his voice small but direct. I took a deep breath. Because sometimes grown-ups need to make hard choices to take care of themselves, I explained. Just like sometimes you might need to step away from a friend who isn't being kind. They seemed to accept this in the uncomplicated way children often can. Before we said goodbye, Marianne pressed her hand to the screen. I miss you, Grandma, she said. I placed my hand against hers, separated by technology and distance. I miss you too, sweetheart. But I'm still your grandma no matter where I am. After that, we spoke every other weekend. Sophie sent me their school pictures, artwork, report cards. Small bridges being rebuilt across the chasm I had created by leaving. I continued building my new life. I expanded my photography beyond simple snapshots, learning about composition, lighting, editing. I sold my first photo, a sunrise over the Santa Barbara Pier, to a local gallery. When I saw it hanging on the wall, my name beneath it, I felt a surge of pride unlike anything I had experienced before. My embroidery classes grew larger. Women came not just to learn a craft, but to find community, to share stories, to support each other. We became something of a sisterhood bound by thread and trust. I started speaking at community centers about financial abuse, helping other women recognize the warning signs I had missed or ignored for so long. Each time I told my story, it became a little easier. Each time I saw recognition in another woman's eyes, I felt a little stronger. Almost a year to the day after I left Denver, I was walking along the beach, camera in hand, when I spotted the inmate work crew again. They were farther down the shore than usual, planting seagrasses along a newly formed dune. Something about one of them caught my eye, the way he moved the shape of his shoulders as he bent to his task. I stopped, my breath catching. It couldn't be, but as the figure straightened, turning slightly toward the ocean, I knew. Daniel. My first instinct was to turn away, to hurry in the opposite direction. But I didn't. I stood there watching my son work his movements, methodical, focused. He looked different, thinner, older, his skin tanned by the California sun, his hands rough from manual labor. I don't know how long I stood there before he sensed my presence, looking up suddenly as if feeling my gaze. His body went still when he saw me. For a long moment, we just looked at each other across the sand, the waves crashing gently between us. I didn't approach him. He couldn't approach me. There were rules guards' boundaries. But he raised his hand in a small, hesitant wave. After a moment's hesitation, I raised mine in return. That night I wrote in my journal about the encounter, trying to make sense of the emotions it had stirred. Anger, yes. Sadness, certainly. But also a strange, unexpected peace. Daniel was paying for his mistakes. He was doing work that mattered, that helped repair something broken. And somehow I had ended up in the same place as him, witnessing his attempt at redemption. Perhaps life really does move in circles, I wrote. Perhaps we are all just finding our way back to ourselves, to each other, one painful step at a time. The next day I returned to the same spot on the beach. I told myself it was for the light, for the photography, but I knew the truth. I was looking for Daniel. And there he was with the same crew working steadily along the dune line. This time when he saw me, he straightened up fully. He said something to the guard, who nodded. Then he walked toward the edge of their work area, as close to me as he was allowed. When he finally stood in front of me, I could see the small tremor in his hands. "I didn't know you lived around here," he said quietly. "I didn't either," I replied, "until I saw you." We stood in silence for a while. The wind picked up, rustling the palm fronds behind us. "You look different," he said. "Healthier." "I am," I answered. "I've been taking care of myself." He nodded, eyes lowering. "Good. You deserve that." For a moment I thought that was all we'd say. Then his voice broke slightly. "I wasn't sure I'd ever see you again." "I didn't expect to," I admitted. "But maybe life has its own plans." He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I guess it does." He told me he was part of a coastal rehabilitation program, planting trees and cleaning beaches as part of his sentence reduction. "It's hard work," he said, glancing toward the other inmates. "But I like it. It keeps my head clear." I looked at his hands, calloused, cracked, stained with dirt. They looked more human than I'd ever seen them. "I'm glad," I said softly. He hesitated. "Did you get my letters?" I did. He swallowed hard. "Did you believe them?" I paused. "I wanted to. And maybe I do now." That seemed to ease something in him. His shoulders dropped. The wind carried the faint scent of salt and seaweed between us. "Mom," he said finally, "I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I mean it. Every word. You were right about everything, about Dad, about me, about the way I lived. I thought control was love. I thought money was respect. Turns out I didn't know either. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't look away. We both made mistakes, Daniel. I stayed silent too long. I should have shown you what real love looked like, without fear, without debt. Maybe then you wouldn't have learned his ways." He shook his head. "You did your best. I know that now." We stood there, the waves crashing gently against the shore, the years between us rising and falling with each breath. "Do you hate me?" he asked suddenly. The question hit me like a gust of wind. "No," I said quietly. "I don't hate you. I hate what you became, but I also see the boy. You were once the one who brought me seashells and called me his hero. I still love that boy." He looked down, blinking hard. "I lost him somewhere along the way." "Then find him again," I whispered. "It's not too late," the guard called out. "Time's up." Daniel nodded, stepping back. "Will I see you again?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe. But whether you do or not, I'll be hoping you keep walking toward the light." He smiled, faint but real. That's all I needed to hear. As he walked away, raking sand alongside the others, I watched him go until he disappeared into the line of men moving down the shore. For the first time, I didn't feel grief. I felt peace. That evening I told Marissa what had happened. She listened quietly, sipping her wine. "Well," she said after a long silence, "life really does come full circle, doesn't it?" I nodded. "I didn't plan it. I just showed up at the right place at the right time." Or maybe she said softly, "You showed up at the right place for both of you." Her words lingered long after she left. Over the next few months I continued seeing the work crews along the beach, though I never approached again. Sometimes I'd spot Daniel in the distance, head bent, planting young trees in neat rows along the dunes. Once he looked up and saw me standing far away near the boardwalk. He didn't wave. Neither did I, but we both smiled. That was enough. Spring came again, bright and fragrant. My embroidery classes grew larger, and my little community of women turned into something more, a sisterhood of sorts. We started donating handmade blankets to local shelters and hospitals. Each piece had a stitched message along the edge. You are not alone. One afternoon during a class, a woman named Linda, newly divorced after 30 years of marriage, asked me, "How do you stop being angry, Margaret? How do you stop hating the person who hurt you?" I thought about Daniel, about Edward, about the long road it had taken to stand where I was now. "You don't stop feeling angry," I said gently. "You just stop feeding it. One day you wake up and realize you don't want to carry their weight anymore. So you put it down and then you keep walking." Linda smiled through tears. "That sounds peaceful." "It is," I said, "and it's worth the wait." A few weeks later, I received a postcard. No return address, just a photo of a small pine sapling growing in sand. On the back, in familiar handwriting, were 6 simple words: still planting, still learning, still trying. I traced the words with my fingers, smiling. Then I placed the postcard beside the 2 letters in the box on my nightstand. It felt like closure, not the kind that slams doors shut, but the kind that leaves them gently ajar, letting light seep through. On my 69th birthday, Sophie and the kids came to visit again. Ethan brought me a handmade card that read, "Happy birthday, Grandma." "You're the strongest person I know." I laughed, hugging him tight. "You're going to make me cry, young man." Mary Ann gave me a small pot with a tiny green sprout. "It's a tree," she said proudly. "We planted it for you." Sophie smiled. "It's from all of us." As I placed the pot on the balcony, the sea breeze brushed against my face, warm and gentle. I looked at the fragile little plant and thought of Daniel's words: still planting, still learning, still trying. Maybe that's all any of us could do. That night after everyone went to bed, I stepped outside. The moon was full, casting silver paths over the water. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the rhythm of the ocean match the rhythm of my heart. For years, my life had been about survival, quiet endurance in the face of pain. But now it was about something else entirely: healing, growing, becoming. I whispered softly into the wind, "I forgive you, Daniel. I forgive you, Edward. And most of all, I forgive myself." The wind seemed to answer, carrying the scent of salt and jasmine across the balcony. And for the first time, I didn't just feel free. I felt whole. The woman who stared back at me from the bathroom mirror each morning looked like a stranger, hair cut short in a stylish bob, eyes brighter, fewer worry lines creasing her forehead. After 68 years, I was finally meeting myself for the first time. The Margaret who existed beneath decades of compromise and compliance was emerging like a butterfly from a chrysalis that had been intact far too long. I bought new clothes that first month in Santa Barbara colors I'd never dared to wear before. A turquoise blouse that matched the ocean on clear days, red sandals with small heels, a yellow sundress that made me feel like sunshine. Edward would have called them attention-seeking and inappropriate for a woman my age. Daniel would have made a joke about me trying to recapture my youth. But I wasn't seeking anyone's attention or trying to be young again. I was simply allowing myself to experience joy, to express who I was without apology. My apartment quickly became a home. I hung photographs I'd taken on the walls, seascapes, close-ups of shells, and driftwood portraits of the sea sisters walking at dawn. I bought bright throw pillows for the couch, fresh flowers for the kitchen table, a wind chime for the balcony that sang with the sea breeze. Small luxuries that added beauty to everyday moments. The sea sisters adopted me as one of their own. 5 women all over 60 who walked the beach every morning at sunrise. Elizabeth, a retired high school principal with a booming laugh. Joan, a widowed botanist who knew the name of every plant along the shore. Renee, a former flight attendant who had traveled the world but found peace in this small coastal town. And Diane, who had left her husband of 40 years after discovering his decades-long affair. We shared our stories over coffee after our walk, swapping tales of resilience and reinvention. These women had weathered storms I could scarcely imagine: cancer, the death of children, financial ruin, yet they walked with straight backs and ready smiles. They showed me that strength wasn't about enduring pain in silence, but about facing it, naming it, and moving beyond it. 6 weeks after my arrival, Marissa called with news that sent a chill through my newly peaceful existence. "Margaret Daniel's looking for you. He's hired a private investigator." My heart stuttered. "Has he found me?" "No," she assured me. "The PI contacted me, but I didn't give him anything. Your new accounts, your address, they're all secure. But there's something else you should know." She paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. "The FBI has been investigating Daniel and Sophie for months. It turns out you weren't the only target of their scheme. They've been running a sophisticated fraud operation targeting elderly people, mostly widows. They're looking at serious federal charges. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. I sank onto the couch, clutching the phone. My son, a criminal. Not just someone who manipulated his mother for money, but someone who deliberately preyed on vulnerable people as a way of life. The thought made me physically ill. How many, I managed to ask. At least a dozen victims, Marissa replied, her voice gentle but factual. They've stolen close to $2 million over the last 3 years. $2 million. The amount staggered me. What had they done with all that money? Their house, while nice, wasn't extravagant. Their cars were expensive but not ostentatious. The children attended public school. Where had it all gone? Gambling, Marissa explained when I asked. Sophie has a serious problem. And Daniel, well, he's been living a double life. Designer clothes, expensive watches, 5-star hotels. Weekend trips Sophie didn't know about. The revelation carved a new hollow in my heart. The son I thought I knew, even with all his flaws, was even more of a stranger than I'd realized. Not just entitled and manipulative, but deliberately cruel, deceptive on a level I couldn't comprehend. What about the children? I asked, my voice breaking. They're still with Sophie for now. The FBI hasn't made arrests yet, but it's coming. They've been building their case carefully. After we hung up, I walked out onto the balcony, needing airspace, the vastness of the ocean to put this new pain in perspective. The sun was setting, painting the water in streaks of gold and crimson. Beautiful and terrible, like life itself. I thought about Ethan and Marianne. Would they visit their father in prison? Would they understand what he had done? How would they process the shame, the upheaval, the loss of the life they knew? My heart ached for them, innocent casualties of their parents' choices. That night I dreamed of them. In the dream they were standing on the shore, waves lapping at their feet, calling for me as the tide rose around them. I tried to reach them, but something held me back, invisible chains around my ankles weighing me down. I woke, gasping, sheets twisted around my legs, the echo of their cries still in my ears. The next morning I called Marissa again. I need to contact Sophie, I told her. I need to make sure the children are all right. She hesitated. Are you sure that's wise? Daniel might use them to find you. I've been hiding long enough, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. I won't let fear of Daniel keep me from my grandchildren. Not anymore. Marissa helped me establish contact cautiously. She reached out to Sophie first, confirming she wasn't working with Daniel, to find me explaining that I was concerned about the children. To my surprise, Sophie agreed to a phone call. Margaret. Her voice was small, uncertain, nothing like the confident woman who had sat in my kitchen so many times accepting my hospitality while plotting to take my savings. Sophie, I said, keeping my tone neutral. How are the children? She broke down immediately, sobbing into the phone. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how bad it was at first, and then when I did know, I was too afraid to stop him. The gambling got out of control and the debts. Oh God, the debts. These people, they're not just loan sharks. They're dangerous. Daniel said your money would solve everything, but it was never going to be enough. I listened to her unravel confessions spilling out in a torrent of fear and remorse. She told me about the FBI investigation, about the evidence they had collected, about the plea deal she was negotiating in exchange for testifying against Daniel. He's not the person I married, she whispered. Or maybe he was, and I just didn't want to see it. I understood that sentiment all too well. Hadn't I spent decades not seeing Edward clearly? And then years more not recognizing what Daniel had become. We construct elaborate blindfolds when the truth is too painful to witness. The children, I prompted gently when her sobs subsided. How are they coping? They miss you, she admitted. They don't understand why you left without saying goodbye. Ethan asks about you all the time. A pang of guilt shot through me. In my desperation to escape, I hadn't considered how my abrupt departure would affect my grandchildren. Another cost of Daniel's actions and my reaction. Could I speak with them sometime? I asked cautiously. I'd like to explain as much as I can. Sophie agreed readily, almost eagerly. I think that would help them. And me. We need family now more than ever. We arranged a video call for the following weekend. I spent the days leading up to it in a state of nervous anticipation, rehearsing what I would say, how I would explain my disappearance without burdening them with adult complexities they couldn't comprehend. When their faces appeared on my screen, Ethan's serious brown eyes, Marianne's gap-toothed smile, tears sprang to my eyes. They had grown in the months since I'd last seen them. Ethan's face was losing its baby roundness, and Marianne's hair was longer pulled back in a ponytail. Grandma Marianne squealed, pressing her face close to the camera. "Where are you?" "Your house looks different." "I'm in California, sweetheart," I told her, turning my laptop so they could see the ocean from my balcony. "I moved here a few months ago." Without telling us, Ethan's voice was plaintive hurt evident in his furrowed brow. "Why didn't you say goodbye?" The question pierced me. I took a deep breath. "Sometimes grown-ups need to make big changes very quickly," I explained carefully. "I had to leave in a hurry, but I never stopped loving you or thinking about you. Not for one single day." They peppered me with questions about the beach, about my new home, about whether I had seen any sharks or dolphins. I answered each one grateful for their resilience, their capacity to adapt to this strange new reality where their grandmother lived across the country and appeared on a screen instead of at Sunday dinners. Before we ended the call, Ethan's expression grew serious again. "Mom says we might come visit you. Can we?" "I would love that more than anything," I told him truthfully. "My door is always open for you." After the call ended, I sat on my balcony watching the waves, heart full and aching simultaneously. I had missed so much of their lives already. How much more would I miss as this situation with their parents unfolded? The next day, I started a new project, a quilt for each of the children embroidered with scenes from our time together. For Ethan, images of the fishing trips we had taken with Daniel when he was younger. For Marianne, the tea parties we had shared in my garden. Memories preserved in thread and fabric, tangible reminders of love that persisted despite distance and circumstance. 2 weeks later, Marissa called again. This time her news was even more shocking. "Daniel and Sophie have been arrested. It's all over the local news in Denver." She sent me a link to an article. The headline made my stomach drop. "Prominent Denver couple charged in elder fraud scheme." Below it, Daniel's and Sophie's mugshots, both looking shell-shocked, disheveled. Nothing like the polished, confident pair I remembered. I read the article with a sense of detachment, as if it were describing strangers instead of my own family. The details were damning. A sophisticated operation targeting elderly individuals with substantial savings, false investment opportunities, fake business documents, multiple bank accounts. The couple had allegedly stolen approximately $2.3 million from 15 victims over a 4-year period. "What happens to the children?" I asked Marissa, the only question that truly mattered to me now. "Sophie's parents have taken them in for now. They've been granted temporary custody while this plays out." I closed my eyes, relief washing through me. At least Ethan and Marianne were with family, with people who loved them. They wouldn't be thrown into the foster care system, wouldn't become yet another statistic in the collateral damage of their parents' crimes. The arrests made national news. Suddenly, the story of Daniel and Sophie Williams, the charming couple who preyed on vulnerable elderly people, was everywhere. Reporters dug into their backgrounds, their lifestyle, the details of their scheme. Each new article revealed another layer of deception, another facet of their elaborate fraud. I stopped reading after the 3rd day. The public dissection of my son's crimes, while deserved, brought me no satisfaction, no closure. It was simply another chapter in a painful story I was trying to move beyond. Instead, I channeled my energy into my new communities. I expanded my embroidery class, offering a special session for women in a local domestic violence shelter. Creating beauty with their hands gave these women a small sense of control of accomplishment in lives that had been dominated by chaos and fear. Watching them master simple stitches, their faces lighting up with pride, helped heal something in me, too. My photography also progressed from hobby to something more serious. I joined a local arts cooperative where members displayed their work in a shared gallery space. To my surprise, my photographs sold not many, and not for large sums, but enough to validate this new passion. People connected with the way I captured light on water, the solitary beauty of a gull in flight, the weathered textures of driftwood and shells. The curator of the cooperative, a retired art professor named James, took an interest in my work. "Your photographs have a quality of reflection," he told me after studying my latest series. "There's a silence in them, a thoughtfulness. You're not just capturing images, you're asking questions with your lens." His observation startled me. I hadn't consciously approached photography that way, but he was right. Each image was a kind of inquiry about beauty, about resilience, about the passage of time, about my own journey from invisibility to presence. Under James's mentorship, I began experimenting with more structured projects. a series on elderly hands engaged in creative work, a study of coastal erosion and restoration efforts, a collection of dawn portraits of the Sea Sisters, their faces illuminated by the day's first light stories etched in every line and crease. It was during my work on this last project that I received another call from Sophie. "The children and I are coming to California next month," she told me, her voice tentative but determined. "My plea deal has been accepted. I'll avoid jail time, but I have to testify against Daniel and pay back what we stole. I thought maybe we could stay with you for a few days. The kids miss you so much." The request surprised me. After everything that had happened after her role in attempting to steal my savings, Sophie was reaching out not just for contact, but for shelter. Part of me wanted to refuse to protect the peaceful life I had built from the chaos and pain of the past. But another part, the part that had been learning about forgiveness, about second chances, recognized something in her voice. Not manipulation, not entitlement, but genuine remorse and a desperate desire to do better for her children. "You can stay as long as you need to," I heard myself saying. "My home is open to you and the children." After we hung up, I wondered if I had made a mistake. Could I really welcome Sophie, the woman who had conspired with my son to defraud me, into my sanctuary? Would her presence bring back all the hurt and betrayal I had worked so hard to move beyond? I shared my concerns with Elizabeth during our morning walk with the Sea Sisters. She listened carefully, then stopped walking, turning to face me directly. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt," she said, her eyes kind but serious. "It's about refusing to let that hurt define your future relationships. Those children need their grandmother, and maybe their mother needs a model of what integrity and compassion look like." Her words stayed with me as I prepared my apartment for visitors. I cleared out my small office, transforming it into a bedroom for the children with an air mattress, colorful pillows, and a small table for drawing. I stocked the refrigerator with foods I remembered they liked: apple juice for Ethan, string cheese for Marianne, fresh berries for them both. The day before their arrival, I received an unexpected letter. The return address was from a correctional facility in Northern California. Daniel's handwriting on the envelope made my heart race. I almost didn't open it, afraid of what manipulation or accusations it might contain. But curiosity won out. Inside was a single page, the handwriting more careful than I remembered, as if each word had been considered before being committed to paper. "Mom, I've been transferred to a minimum security facility in California as part of my plea agreement. I'll be here for at least 3 years. Sophie told me she and the kids are coming to see you. I'm glad. They need you now more than I ever realized. I don't expect your forgiveness. What I did to you, what I've done to so many people, doesn't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know I'm trying to understand how I became this person. The therapist here is helping me see the patterns how I learned from Dad, to use people to see relationships as transactions. I remember being that little boy who brought you wildflowers. I remember how proud I was when you smiled. Somewhere along the way, I lost that boy who just wanted to make his mother happy. I became someone who only knew how to take. I'm part of a coastal restoration project here. We plant trees along eroded shorelines. It's the first worthwhile thing I've done in years. Some days when I'm working with my hands in the soil, I think about all the things I've destroyed and wonder if I'll ever be able to rebuild any of it. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. That's your choice, and I'll respect whatever you decide. But I wanted you to know that the boy with the wildflowers isn't completely gone. He's still in here somewhere, trying to find his way back to the light. Daniel, I read the letter 3 times, searching for hidden agendas, for the manipulative undertones I had come to expect from my son, but I couldn't find them. Either he had become a better actor in prison, or he was genuinely beginning to confront the truth about himself and his actions. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer with the others. Time would reveal which was true. For now, I had grandchildren to prepare for, a family visit to navigate my own boundaries, to maintain even as I opened my home and heart. Sophie and the children arrived on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. Marianne burst through the door first, flinging herself into my arms with the uninhibited joy only a child can express. Ethan followed more cautiously, but his tight hug conveyed everything he couldn't say. And then Sophie, standing awkwardly in the doorway, suitcases at her feet, uncertainty written across her face. I surprised myself by stepping forward and embracing her too, not with the warmth I felt for my grandchildren, but with the compassion of one broken person recognizing another. "Welcome," I said simply. "You must be exhausted from your journey." The next few days established a new rhythm in my quiet life. Mornings at the beach with the children building sandcastles, collecting shells, teaching them to use my camera to capture the things that caught their eye. Afternoons exploring Santa Barbara, the Mission, the wharf, the botanical gardens. Evenings on the balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors while Marianne and Ethan pointed out shapes in the clouds. Sophie kept a respectful distance, helping with meals and cleanup, but never presuming intimacy or forgiveness. I caught her watching me sometimes with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Not envy exactly, but a kind of wistful recognition of something she had never experienced. On their third evening after the children were asleep, she joined me on the balcony with 2 cups of tea. "I've been wanting to ask you something," she said hesitantly. "How did you do it? How did you walk away from everything you knew and build this new life? I've never seen you look so at peace." The question caught me off guard. I had expected many things from Sophie during this visit. Apologies, explanations, perhaps even justifications for what she and Daniel had done. But not this genuine curiosity about my transformation. I took a sip of tea, gathering my thoughts. "I think we all have moments when we can either continue as we are or choose a different path," I said finally. For 30 years with Edward, I chose to stay small to accept being controlled and diminished because it seemed safer than the alternative. Then with Daniel, I fell into the same pattern. Until that morning when he demanded my savings and something in me finally said enough. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the darkening ocean. "I feel like I'm at that moment now," she confessed. "Everything I thought I knew about Daniel, about our marriage, about who I am, it's all been shattered. I have to decide what to rebuild from the pieces. It takes courage," I told her, "and time. And forgiveness, especially of yourself." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I don't know if I deserve forgiveness. I knew what we were doing was wrong. I could have stopped it. I could have protected those people. Protected you." I studied her face in the fading light, seeing not the polished, confident woman who had sat in my kitchen beside Daniel, but someone younger, vulnerable, genuinely struggling to understand her own complicity. "Deserving has nothing to do with forgiveness," I said gently. "It's not earned. It's given. Sometimes the person who needs it most is yourself." She wiped her eyes, attempting a smile. "I can see why Daniel was always a little afraid of you, even when he thought he was controlling you. You have this strength that doesn't announce itself. It just is." The observation startled me. Daniel afraid of me. The idea seemed absurd. Yet as I considered it, I realized there might be truth there. Perhaps he had sensed on some level the steel beneath my compliance, the quiet determination that had finally asserted itself when I walked away. The visit lasted 10 days longer than originally planned, but too short for the children who begged to stay forever. On their last morning, Ethan presented me with a drawing he had made a woman standing on a beach camera in hand, surrounded by seagulls and shells. Grandma Margaret, he had labeled it carefully, Queen of the Beach. I knelt to hug him, throat tight with emotion. "I'll treasure this always, I promised, and I'll frame it and hang it right here in the living room so I can see it every day." Marianne gave me a bracelet she had made from shells collected during our beach walks, each one carefully selected and strung on a length of blue yarn. "So you don't forget me," she explained seriously. "As if I could ever forget you," I told her, securing the bracelet around my wrist. "I'll wear it every day until you come back to visit again." Sophie hung back, watching these exchanges with a bittersweet smile. When the children went to pack their final items, she handed me an envelope. "It's not much," she said quietly. "Just a start. I'm paying back all the victims a little each month." Inside was a check for $5,000, a fraction of what she and Daniel had attempted to take from me, but a meaningful gesture nonetheless. "You don't have to," I began, but she shook her head firmly. "I do. Not because it erases what we did, but because it's the right thing to do. And I want the children to see that when you make mistakes, you take responsibility and try to make them right." As I watched their taxi pull away from the curb, Marianne's small hand waving frantically from the back window, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, sadness at their departure, joy at the reconnection we had established, cautious hope for what the future might hold. The visit had been healing in ways I hadn't anticipated, not just for them, but for me. That night I walked along the beach at sunset, camera in hand, but taking no photographs. The sky was a riot of color, crimson and gold near the horizon, deepening to purple and indigo above. The waves washed in and out, constant and soothing. In their rhythm, I found my own, the slow, steady pace of a life being rebuilt, one choice at a time. A seagull swooped low over the water wings, gilded by the setting sun, And I thought about flight, how it requires both surrender to the wind and the strength to navigate through it. Perhaps that was what I had been learning all this time. Not just how to escape, but how to soar. After Sophie and the children left, a peaceful silence settled over my apartment. Their visit had brought joy and healing I hadn't expected. The small pot with Marianne's tree seedlings sat proudly on my balcony, catching the late afternoon sunlight. I watered it carefully, knowing this fragile life would require patience and attention, much like the relationships I was cautiously rebuilding. That evening, I received a call from Marissa with news that sent a chill through my newly peaceful existence. Margaret, the FBI, is moving forward with charges against Daniel and Sophie. They've built a solid case, bank records, victim statements, electronic communications. It's not just about what they tried to do to you. They've been running this scheme for years. My heart stuttered. How many others? At least 15 victims, all elderly, mostly widows or widowers. They've taken over $2 million. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. My son, a serial predator targeting the most vulnerable. The betrayal I had experienced wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a systematic operation. The knowledge made me physically ill. What will happen to them, I managed to ask. They'll likely face federal charges, wire fraud, elder abuse, money laundering. Daniel's looking at substantial prison time. Sophie might get a lighter sentence if she cooperates. And the children, they'll probably go to Sophie's parents for now. The authorities are aware of the situation and want to minimize trauma for them. I sat with this information, my mind racing through implications, consequences, possibilities. My grandchildren would lose both parents to the justice system. They would face the shame and confusion of having their family torn apart, of understanding gradually that their parents had committed serious crimes. That night I dreamed of them, Ethan and Marianne, standing on a shore as the tide rose around them, calling for help. I tried to reach them, but couldn't move my feet, frozen to the sand. I woke, gasping, sheets twisted around my legs, the echo of their cries still ringing in my ears. The next morning, I called Marissa back. I need to contact Sophie, I told her. I need to make sure the children are all right. She hesitated. Are you sure that's wise? Daniel might use them to find you. I've been hiding long enough. I won't let fear of Daniel keep me from my grandchildren. Marissa arranged the contact carefully. She reached out to Sophie first, confirming she wasn't working with Daniel to locate me, explaining my concern for the children. To my surprise, Sophie agreed to a phone call. The voice that answered was unrecognizable, small, frightened, nothing like the confident woman who had sat in my kitchen while plotting to take my savings. Margaret, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how bad it was at first, and then when I did, I was too afraid to stop him. Everything spiraled, the gambling, the lies, the threats from the people we owed. I listened as she unraveled confession, pouring out in a torrent of fear and remorse. She told me about the FBI investigation, about the evidence they had collected about her decision to cooperate. The prosecutor says if I testify against Daniel, I might avoid prison time. Just probation and restitution. I'm going to do it. Not to save myself, but for the children. They can't lose both of us. What have you told them? I asked. Nothing specific. Just that Daddy and I made some mistakes, that we have to fix them. That it might take a while. Could I speak with them? I asked cautiously. I'd like them to know I'm still here for them, no matter what. She agreed readily. We arranged a video call for the following weekend. I spent the days leading up to it in nervous anticipation, rehearsing what I would say, how I would reassure them without lying, or burdening them with adult complexities. When their faces appeared on my screen, Ethan's serious eyes, Marianne's gap-toothed smile, tears sprang to my eyes. "Grandma, where are you?" Marianne squealed, pressing close to the camera. "I'm in California, sweetheart." I showed them the ocean from my balcony, the palm trees, the bright flowers on my patio. I moved here a few months ago. Without saying goodbye, Ethan's voice was hurt, accusatory. Sometimes grown-ups have to make big changes quickly, I explained gently. I had to leave in a hurry, but I never stopped loving you or thinking about you. Not for a single day. They peppered me with questions about my new home, about whether I'd seen any sharks or dolphins. I answered each one, grateful for their resilience, their capacity to adapt to strange new realities. We talked about their school, their friends, their activities, normal childhood concerns that provided a welcome respite from the legal storm gathering around their parents. Before ending the call, I made them a promise. No matter what happens, I'll always be your grandmother. Nothing can ever change that. And whenever you need me, I'll find a way to be there." After the call, I sat on my balcony watching waves roll onto the shore, heart both full and aching. In my determination to escape Daniel's manipulation, I had inadvertently abandoned these innocent children. Now they faced a much greater abandonment, the potential imprisonment of both parents. I resolved not to fail them again, no matter what complexities that commitment might entail. 3 weeks later, I received word that Daniel and Sophie had been arrested. Marissa sent me a link to the Denver Post article, "Prominent Denver Couple Charged in Elder Fraud Scheme." The mugshots beneath the headline showed 2 people I barely recognized, disheveled, shocked, stripped of the polished confidence they had always projected. The article detailed their alleged crimes: systematic targeting of elderly individuals with substantial savings creation of fraudulent investment opportunities, use of personal connections to build trust, elaborate paper trails to conceal the scam. All told, they had stolen approximately $2.3 million from 15 victims over 4 years. Sophie's parents had taken custody of the children temporarily. I arranged another video call, finding Ethan and Marianne subdued but coping. Their grandparents were kind, they assured me, but they missed their home, their friends, their normal routine. "Is Mommy in jail?" Marianne asked directly, her small face solemn. I took a deep breath, determined to be honest without frightening her. "Your Mommy and Daddy have to answer some questions about mistakes they made. While that's happening, they have to stay with some special police. It's not forever, though. Your mom will probably come home much sooner than your dad." When Ethan demanded a tremor in his voice, revealing the anxiety beneath his attempt at toughness. "I don't know exactly, sweetheart, but I promise to stay in touch with you while we figure it out together." Over the following months, Sophie's cooperation with authorities became a matter of public record. She provided evidence against Daniel, detailed their operation, identified other potential victims. In exchange, prosecutors agreed to recommend probation, rather than prison time, 3 years under supervision, significant community service, and a restitution payment plan that would consume most of her income for decades to come. Daniel, facing overwhelming evidence, eventually accepted a plea deal rather than go to trial. 6 to 8 years in federal prison, depending on the judge's determination at sentencing. Full restitution to victims. Mandatory counseling and financial education. Through Marissa's legal connections, I learned that both Sophie and Daniel would be permitted to provide victim impact statements at their respective sentencing hearings. These statements from those harmed by their actions would help the judge determine appropriate sentences within the guidelines of the plea agreements. As a victim of their attempted fraud, I received a formal letter from the court inviting me to submit such a statement. The prosecutor would read it aloud, or I could deliver it personally if I chose to attend the sentencing. I stared at the letter for days, uncertain how to respond. Did I want my pain and betrayal to become part of the public record? Did I want to face Daniel in a courtroom to witness his reaction as I described how his actions had affected me? More importantly, what purpose would it serve? My statement wouldn't significantly alter the legal outcome. Daniel had admitted guilt. The evidence was overwhelming. What would be gained by adding my voice to the chorus of those he had harmed? I took the question to my morning walk with the C sisters. Elizabeth, with her background in education and psychology, listened thoughtfully to my dilemma. "You don't owe the court system your pain," she told me finally. "But sometimes speaking your truth publicly can be healing, not for Daniel, not for the judge, but for you, and perhaps for others who might hear it and find the courage to protect themselves from similar situations." Diane nodded in agreement. When I finally told our circle of friends the truth about Richard's affairs, it wasn't to punish him. It was to reclaim my own story, to stop being the woman who didn't know who wasn't enough, who could be deceived for years. Their perspectives clarified my own feelings. This wasn't about vengeance or adding to Daniel's punishment. It was about standing in my truth, owning my experience without shame or minimization. That afternoon, I sat on my balcony with a notepad attempting to distill years of complex emotions into a coherent statement. Words failed me repeatedly. How could I express the particular betrayal of being targeted by my own child? How could I convey the mixture of love and disappointment, anger and grief that accompanied this violation of trust? In frustration, I set the notepad aside and picked up my camera instead. I scrolled through my photographs: sunrise over the ocean, pelicans diving for fish, children building sandcastles, the lined faces of the Sea Sisters. And suddenly I knew what I wanted to say, not just about what Daniel had done, but about what I had done in response. about the strength I had found in walking away the life I had built from the shattered remains of the old one. I wrote through the night, words flowing with unexpected ease. By dawn, I had my statement honest, but not vindictive, personal, but not maudlin. I sent it to the court the next day with a note indicating I would deliver it in person. 2 weeks later, I flew back to Denver for the first time since my escape. The familiar skyline against the Rocky Mountains, the dry air so different from coastal humidity, the quality of light unique to high altitudes, all felt simultaneously foreign and achingly familiar, like a place revisited in dreams. Marissa met me at the airport, embracing me with the fierceness of a friend who had walked through fire alongside me. "You look amazing," she said, stepping back to study me. "California clearly agrees with you." I stayed in her guest room rather than a hotel, grateful for the warmth of long friendship during this difficult return. We talked late into the evening, catching up on everything that had transpired since my departure, her cases, my photography, mutual acquaintances, the changes in the city. She avoided mentioning the next day's hearing until I brought it up myself. "Will Sophie be there?" I asked as we sipped herbal tea in her kitchen. "No, her sentencing was last month. 3 years probation, 2,000 hours of community service and restitution payments. The children are still with her parents while she gets established in a job and a suitable living situation." I nodded, relieved that tomorrow wouldn't include confronting my former daughter-in-law. Facing Daniel would be challenging enough. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in Marissa's guest room watching moonlight create patterns on the ceiling, rehearsing my statement in my mind. Not the words, those were committed to memory, but the emotions behind them. I wanted to speak from a place of clarity and strength, not lingering anger or hurt. Sometime before dawn, I realized what I feared most, not seeing Daniel, not speaking in court, but being pulled back into old patterns, falling into the familiar role of the accommodating mother, the one who forgave too easily, who accepted crumbs of consideration as feasts of respect. I rose early and wrote on a small card that would fit in my pocket, "You are not responsible for his healing, only your own." A reminder to carry with me into the courtroom, a talisman against old habits. The federal courthouse dominated downtown Denver, an imposing structure of glass and stone. I arrived early, passing through security, following Marissa's guidance to the correct courtroom. The prosecutor met us in the hallway, a serious young woman with kind eyes who explained the proceedings, where I would sit when I would be called to speak. "You've submitted a very powerful statement, Mrs. Williams," she told me. "If delivering it becomes too difficult, I'm prepared to read it for you." "I appreciate that," I replied, "but I need to do this myself." We entered the courtroom, taking seats in the section reserved for victims and their representatives. Other people filed in, elderly individuals who had been defrauded by my son, their family members, court officials, a few journalists. And then a side door opened and Daniel appeared, escorted by guards. He wore an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. His hair was shorter than I remembered, his face thinner, his posture less commanding. He scanned the courtroom, and when his eyes found mine, he froze momentarily. Then he gave a small, solemn nod, not a greeting exactly, but an acknowledgement. The proceedings began with formal introductions and statements about the purpose of the hearing. The prosecutor summarized the case against Daniel, the evidence that had been presented, the terms of the plea agreement. 5 to 8 years, depending on the judge's discretion. Restitution to all victims. Mandatory counseling. Then came the victim impact statements. One by one, people approached the podium, sharing how Daniel's actions had affected their lives. A retired teacher who had lost her husband's life insurance payout. A widower who could no longer afford the assisted living facility he had planned to move into. A couple who had postponed retirement indefinitely after losing their savings. Their stories were heartbreaking, their dignity remarkable. Some spoke with anger, others with sadness, all with the courage of those who refused to be silenced by shame. Daniel watched each speaker, his expression unreadable but attentive. He did not look away, did not fidget or show impatience. He simply listened. When my name was called, I rose from my seat, the card in my pocket, seeming to pulse against my leg. The walk to the podium felt endless, yet over too quickly. And then I was there, facing the judge, aware of Daniel in my peripheral vision of the courtroom full of people harmed by my son. I adjusted the microphone and began. "Your Honor, my name is Margaret Williams. I am Daniel Williams's mother, and I am also one of his victims. That dual identity makes this statement particularly difficult to deliver. How does one reconcile the love of a parent with the betrayal of a predator? How does one speak about a child who has become a stranger? Last year, Daniel came to my home and demanded $300,000, claiming his wife had made failed investments with dangerous people. He used every manipulation technique in his arsenal, guilt-fear appeals to family loyalty. When I hesitated, he reminded me that I had always said I would do anything for him. What Daniel didn't know was that his demand would become the catalyst for my liberation. After a lifetime of accommodation, first to my controlling husband, then to my entitled son, something inside me finally said enough. Instead of giving him my savings, I transferred them to an account he couldn't access. I packed a suitcase, wrote him a letter explaining my decision, and left town before he returned for dinner. At 68 years old, I walked away from everything familiar to build a new life based on my own choices, my own values. The financial impact of Daniel's attempted fraud on me was ultimately minimal thanks to my decisive action. But the emotional impact was devastating. To know that your own child sees you not as a person worthy of respect, but as a resource to be exploited, there are no words adequate to describe that pain. Yet from that pain came unexpected growth. In leaving Denver and saying no to further abuse, I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. I made new friends, developed new skills, built a community based on mutual support rather than obligation. I learned that it's never too late to reclaim your life, to establish boundaries, to demand dignity. I do not speak today seeking a harsher sentence for my son. The legal system will determine appropriate consequences for his actions. I speak for two reasons only: to honor my own experience by naming it truthfully, and to perhaps reach others who remain trapped in cycles of exploitation and control. To those people, especially women of my generation who were taught that self-sacrifice is the highest virtue, I want to say this: you matter, your needs matter, your dreams matter, and it is never ever too late to declare your own worth. As for Daniel, I can only hope that his time in prison becomes a period of genuine reflection and transformation. The little boy who once brought me wildflowers and called me his hero is still in there somewhere beneath layers of entitlement and deception. I hope he finds his way back to authentic humanity, not just for my sake, but for his own. Thank you, Your Honor, for allowing me to share my story. I stepped away from the podium legs, surprisingly steady, mind clear. As I returned to my seat beside Marissa, I allowed myself a single glance at Daniel. His head was bowed, shoulders hunched as if bearing a physical weight. A tear tracked down his cheek, falling onto his clenched hands. The remaining statements were delivered, and then it was time for Daniel to address the court before sentencing. He rose slowly, moving to the podium with measured steps, the chains around his ankles clinking softly in the hushed courtroom. Your Honor, he began, voice rougher than I remembered. I've prepared a statement, but after hearing from the people I've harmed, especially my mother, I need to speak more directly. He turned slightly, gaze finding me in the gallery. Mom, I'm so sorry. Not just for trying to take your money, but for all the times I treated you as less than the extraordinary person you are. Dad taught me that women existed to serve men's needs, and I never questioned that toxic lesson. I can see now how wrong that was, how much damage that mindset caused. He faced the judge again. I accept full responsibility for my actions. I manipulated vulnerable people, exploited their trust, stole their security. There's no excuse for what I did, no justification that would make it less reprehensible. I don't ask for leniency. I ask only for the opportunity to make amends, however inadequate those amends might be. The judge studied him thoughtfully before delivering the sentence: 6 years in a minimum security facility with eligibility for parole after 4, full restitution to all victims, mandatory counseling and financial management education, 3 years of supervised release after incarceration. As guards led Daniel away, he turned one last time, eyes meeting mine across the courtroom. In that moment, I saw not just regret, but something rarer and more valuable: the beginning of understanding. Not a complete transformation that would require years of dedicated work, but the first tentative steps toward genuine change. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered on the steps, cameras and microphones ready. Marissa guided me toward a side exit, shielding me from their questions, their hunger for sound bites and sensationalism. Are you okay? She asked as we reached her car. I considered the question carefully, not in the simple sense of being happy or untroubled, but in a deeper way, in the sense of being true to myself, of having spoken my truth without flinching, of having witnessed my son begin to face his own reality. Yes, I was okay. Actually, I'm better than okay, I told her. I'm at peace. I changed my flight to that evening, eager to return to my new home, my new life. As I hugged Marissa goodbye at the airport, she pressed something into my hand, a small velvet pouch. "Open it when you get home," she instructed, "a reminder of who you've become." On the plane, watching Denver's lights recede beneath me, I felt a sense of completion. I had confronted the past not by dwelling in it, but by speaking truth to it. I had seen my son without illusions, yet also without hatred. I had stood in my own power, neither diminished by old patterns, nor inflated by moral superiority. When I arrived back in my Santa Barbara apartment past midnight, the ocean murmured in darkness beyond my balcony. I switched on a lamp, made myself tea, and opened Marissa's velvet pouch. Inside was a delicate silver pendant, a rose in full bloom emerging from rocky ground. With it a card in her elegant handwriting, "For Margaret, who taught us all how to grow in difficult soil." I fastened the necklace around my throat, touched by the perfect symbolism of the gift, then stepped onto my balcony. The full moon illuminated the beach, turning sand to silver ocean to a path of light. In that moment, I felt connected to everything, past and present, pain and healing, the journey and its destination. 6 months later, I received an unexpected letter from Daniel's correctional facility. He had been transferred to a minimum security prison in Northern California, closer to where I lived. Part of a coastal restoration project, he explained, planting native species along eroded shorelines to prevent further damage and repair what had been lost. He wrote about his therapy sessions, insights gained, patterns recognized, about the toxic masculinity he had absorbed from Edward, the entitlement he had never questioned, the emptiness he had tried to fill with material possessions and control over others. "I don't expect your forgiveness," he wrote. "What I did to you, what I've done to so many people, doesn't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know I'm trying to understand how I became this person. The therapist here is helping me see the patterns. I remember being that little boy who brought you wildflowers. I remember how proud I was when you smiled. Somewhere along the way, I lost that boy who just wanted to make his mother happy. I became someone who only knew how to take." The letter continued, describing his work on the coastal restoration project, the satisfaction of creating rather than destroying, of contributing rather than extracting. "Some days when I'm working with my hands in the soil, I think about all the things I've destroyed and wonder if I'll ever be able to rebuild any of it. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. That's your choice, and I'll respect whatever you decide. But I wanted you to know that the boy with the wildflowers isn't completely gone. He's still in here somewhere, trying to find his way back to the light." I read the letter 3 times, searching for manipulative undertones, for the guilt trips and emotional leverage Daniel had always employed, but I couldn't find them. Either he had become more sophisticated in his tactics, or he was genuinely beginning to understand the consequences of his actions. I decided to respond briefly, maintaining boundaries while acknowledging his efforts. "I'm glad you're finding meaning in the restoration work," I wrote. "Every day is a chance to plant something new." Meanwhile, Sophie had completed her first year of probation successfully. She had found work as an administrative assistant at a law firm, secured a modest apartment near her parents, and begun rebuilding a life centered on honest work and caring for her children. She called me regularly with updates on Ethan and Marianne, sent photographs of school events and art projects, arranged video calls so I could maintain my relationship with them despite the distance. We developed an unexpected rapport, tentative at first, then gradually more comfortable. Not the relationship we would have had without the past between us, but something new and valuable nonetheless. On my 70th birthday, she surprised me with plane tickets for herself and the children to visit for a week. "Your choice of dates," she said. "We can work around your schedule." The visit coincided with spring break, allowing the children to experience California without missing school. They arrived bearing homemade cards, small gifts they had selected themselves, and infectious excitement about our planned excursions. Ethan had developed an interest in marine biology and wanted to visit tide pools, aquariums, anywhere he could observe sea creatures in their natural habitat. Marianne, artistic and imaginative, was eager to collect shells, build elaborate sandcastles, create mermaid gardens in the sand. We spent sun-filled days exploring the coast, Santa Barbara's harbor, Butterfly Beach, the Channel Islands Marine Sanctuary. I taught them to use my camera, delighting in their unique perspectives, the details they noticed that adult eyes often missed. In the evenings after the children went to bed, Sophie and I talked on the balcony, watching stars emerge over the ocean. She spoke candidly about her therapy, her struggles with gambling addiction, the shame she was working to process in healthy ways. The hardest part is explaining to the kids, she confessed one night. Ethan's old enough to understand some of it. He knows we did something wrong, that we took money from people. But how do I tell him the whole truth without making him think he comes from bad people? Children are remarkably good at understanding complexity when we give them the chance, I suggested. You don't have to tell them everything at once, but you can start with the truth that people sometimes make terrible mistakes, and that real strength comes from admitting those mistakes and working to make amends. She nodded slowly. That's what I'm trying to show them. That's why I want them to have a relationship with you. You're the strongest person I know, Margaret. You walked away when it would have been easier to stay. You built a new life when most people would have just endured the old one. I want them to see that courage is possible at any age. Her words touched me deeply. In my former life, I had never imagined being described as strong or courageous. I had been the accommodator, the peacekeeper, the one who bent rather than stood firm. That this young woman who had once seen me as merely Daniel's compliant mother, an easy mark, now viewed me as a model of strength, represented a profound transformation for us both. On their last morning in Santa Barbara, we walked along the beach at sunrise, the children racing ahead to examine whatever treasures the tide had deposited overnight. Sophie and I strolled more slowly, comfortable in shared silence. I've been thinking, she said finally. When my probation ends in 2 years, I'd like to move here to California, I mean. Not necessarily Santa Barbara, but somewhere on the coast. The children love it here, and I think we all need a fresh start in a place without so many painful associations. What about when Daniel is released? I asked carefully. She sighed. I don't know. That's years away. The children deserve to have a relationship with him, but I can't be with him again. Too much has happened. Too much has been revealed about who he really is, who we were together. I nodded, understanding completely. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for ourselves and for others is to recognize when a relationship has reached its natural conclusion. The following year brought unexpected developments. Daniel was accepted into a work release program that allowed him to spend days with a coastal restoration crew, returning to the correctional facility only at night. The program was based just north of Santa Barbara, a coincidence that seemed too meaningful to be random. Sophie brought the children to visit him monthly, carefully supervised encounters in a park near the beach. Afterwards, they would come to my apartment full of stories about what they had done with their father, games, played conversations, shared small connections, rebuilt in the shadow of painful realities. I kept my distance from these visits, initially not wanting to complicate an already delicate situation. But eventually, Ethan asked the question that had been hovering unspoken between all of us. Why don't you come see Dad with us? Grandma, he misses you. He talks about you all the time. I glanced at Sophie, who nodded encouragingly. He does talk about you, Margaret. About how you taught him what real strength looks like. About how he hopes to earn back some small measure of your respect someday. After careful consideration, consultation with my therapist, discussions with the C sisters, honest self-examination, I agreed to accompany Sophie and the children on their next visit. Not out of obligation or guilt, but from a position of strength and clarity about my own boundaries. The meeting took place in a coastal park where Daniel's work crew was planting native shrubs to prevent erosion. A guard maintained discreet supervision from a distance as we approached. Daniel was kneeling in the sand, demonstrating to Marianne how to create a small basin around a newly planted sapling to capture rainwater. He looked up as we drew near, his expression shifting from delight at seeing the children to uncertainty when he noticed me hanging back. He stood slowly, brushing sand from his knees. "Mom," he said simply, voice thick with emotion. "You came." I nodded, maintaining a slight distance. "I wanted to see this project you've been writing about. The children speak of nothing else after their visits." He gestured to the coastline where dozens of small plants created a green line along the dunes. "It's not much yet, but in 5 years, 10 years, it will make a difference. Hold back the erosion. Give birds places to nest. Create beauty." I heard in his words an analogy for his own efforts at rehabilitation, small consistent actions that might over time repair some small portion of the damage he had caused. Not dramatic gestures of redemption, but patient, humble work toward a better future. The children pulled him toward the play structure nearby, eager to show him their latest climbing skills. Sophie followed, giving Daniel and me a moment of privacy. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I know it couldn't have been an easy decision." "It wasn't," I acknowledged. "But I'm trying to practice what I preach about growth and second chances. The children love you. That matters to me." He nodded, gaze direct but not demanding. I don't expect things to ever be the way they were between us. I don't deserve that. But I want you to know I think about your statement in court every day. About how you found your strength by walking away. It taught me more than years of therapy could have. Over the next 2 years, I established careful boundaries around my relationship with Daniel. I occasionally accompanied the children on their visits, but maintained my separate identity, my independent life. I neither cut him off completely, nor fell back into old enabling patterns. When Sophie's probation ended, she made good on her plan to move to California, securing a job at a legal nonprofit in San Diego and an apartment near good schools. Close enough for regular visits, but far enough to maintain our separate spheres. The woman who stared back at me from the mirror, now at 72, with silver hair styled in a modern bob, clear eyes, and fewer worry lines, was someone I had grown to respect. Not perfect, not without regrets or sorrows, but authentic. A woman who had learned that standing in her truth was not selfish but essential, that boundaries were not walls, but healthy definitions of self, that forgiveness didn't require forgetting. My embroidery classes expanded into a formal program at the community center specifically designed for women in transition, those leaving abusive relationships, recovering from addiction, rebuilding after loss. We created beauty with our hands while rebuilding our souls through shared stories and mutual support. My photography found its way into local galleries, then regional exhibitions. I developed a particular focus on elderly hands engaged in creative work, the Sea Sisters painting and writing, my embroidery students, stitching intricate patterns, community gardeners, coaxing life from soil. The series, titled Late Bloomers, celebrated the creativity and vitality that can emerge in life's latter chapters. The tiny tree Marianne had given me flourished on my balcony, growing tall enough to provide shade for morning coffee, evening wine, midday reading. Its roots had broken through the original pot, requiring transplantation to a larger container. Like me, it had needed more space to grow than initially provided. On warm evenings, I often sat beneath its branches, watching the sunset over the Pacific, marveling at the journey that had brought me here. From a controlled, diminished existence to this expansive life, filled with meaningful work, genuine connections, and hard-won wisdom. Life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. Daniel completed his sentence and established himself in a small landscaping business, specializing in native drought-resistant plants. Sophie found fulfillment in her legal advocacy work, helping other women navigate systems that had once seemed impenetrable to her. My grandchildren grew into thoughtful, resilient young people who understood more about human complexity than I had at twice their age. My own heart opened to new possibilities, including a warm friendship with a retired professor named James, who shared my passion for photography and jazz. We enjoy companionship without expectations, independence without isolation, a relationship built on mutual respect rather than need or obligation. But perhaps the most meaningful development has been the ripple effect of my journey on others. Women from my classes who found courage to make their own difficult changes. Friends who established boundaries in toxic relationships. Even strangers who read about our case and reached out with their own stories of liberation. Yesterday, a package arrived from Daniel. Inside was a book titled Coastal Restoration California Success Stories. He had flagged a page featuring the project he had worked on during his incarceration. The before and after photos were striking barren, eroded shoreline, transformed into a thriving ecosystem of native plants, returning birds, stabilized dunes. He had written on a note card, "Evidence that damaged places can heal with consistent care. Thank you for teaching me that." I placed the book on my coffee table, a tangible reminder that growth can emerge from the most broken landscapes. That patience and persistence can transform even the most damaged ecosystems, whether natural or human. Tonight, as I sit on my balcony under a canopy of stars, the ocean whispering below, I am filled with profound gratitude. Not just for the beauty that surrounds me or the peace I have found, but for the difficult journey that led here. The pain was real, the losses significant, the betrayals devastating. I don't minimize any of that or pretend that happiness erases suffering, but I recognize now that breaking free of old patterns, speaking truth to power, choosing myself after a lifetime of accommodation, these actions created space for authentic living. To anyone trapped in cycles of control and diminishment who believes it's too late to change, who fears the unknown, more than familiar pain, take one small step toward your own truth, then another, and another. It's never too late to begin again. Never too late to say enough. Never too late to discover the person you were always meant to be, waiting patiently beneath layers of compromise and accommodation. The stars shine bright above the ocean tonight, their light traveling millions of years to reach my eyes. Some of those stars have already died, yet their radiance continues its journey through space and time, touching shores they will never see. Perhaps that's the most beautiful truth I've learned, that our actions, our courage, our moments of authentic living radiate outward in ways we may never fully comprehend. That the light we choose to shine today might illuminate paths for others long after we're gone. And isn't that, after all, the most meaningful legacy any of us could hope to leave?